I don't know if I fully understand what you're saying, but I really, really disagree with that. Okay, some context here. We made a video a couple weeks ago, actually it was me, and it was sharing the story of a situation that I had with my daughter Dove. So you can watch that video by clicking here. Can we do that? I think we can do that. The summary, I share the story about how Dove's 18 now and how we're starting to relate to her in a different way. And specifically I say, instead of rules, when she let me down in terms of, she said she was gonna do this thing for me and she didn't, I kind of told her about it, my disappointment, because it didn't feel good to me as a friend that we were starting to move into a friendship. And it got a lot of feedback and responses.
A lot of negativity.
Yeah, that too.
So much so that I was like, I think I'm staying away from these comments for now.
But I think it's worth doing a follow-up video.
Yeah.
Because when something gets that much feedback and that much strong feedback, it's really the closest to a conversation we get around here in this YouTube channel format, and I really do want to address this. So I don't want to just be defensive and react to everything, but I do want to respond because I think, you know,
it can be helpful probably to some people who want to hear our response.
So we're going to respond to 10 comments. Number 1 was the most liked comment by Aaron.
Aaron says, it seems passive aggressive to ask a favor and then when you don't get the answer you want to rescind or resent other things you do for Dove. If those...
So I want to clarify real quick, and I'm going to interrupt because we're responding.
Yeah.
I don't think it's passive aggressive to share your opinion. That's aggressive aggressive. I mean,
well,
by definition.
It's not passive aggressive is more like
to drop hints.
To do these subtle, like giving Dove a cold shoulder instead of telling her what's bothering you.
Which I didn't do that. I did say that I didn't bring it up to Dove right away because I wanted to wait to see if Dove wanted to address it. But that's because I was respecting her preferences, not because I was trying, I wasn't afraid, I don't think, or I wasn't trying to like teach her a lesson. The other thing I want to clarify, she says, it seems passive aggressive to ask for a favor and then when you don't get the answer you want to resent the other person. It wasn't that I asked for a favor and then she didn't give me the answer I want and then I resented her. It was that I asked for a favor, she agreed to it, she said yes, and then she didn't follow through. So to me that would be the equivalent of saying, if your friend says, hey yeah, I'll meet you at the coffee shop at 7 o'clock, and you show up at the coffee shop at 7 and your friend doesn't show up, you're not resenting them because they didn't give you the answer they wanted. You resent them, or at least the situation, because the person said they were going to be there and they're not. Yeah. So at the very least, I think I would expect an apology from that friend to say, hey, sorry, I said I was going to be there and I slept in, or I...
And the next time your friend says, hey, meet me at the coffee shop, you might not do it. Because...
if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
All right, you want to keep on going, sorry.
If those things aren't freely given, then when you ask for a favor, it really isn't a favor at all. It is payment you feel you deserve for doing what you do for her. I'm betting she can feel that it isn't a favor and it makes things weird. Again, I don't think it was a favor, but also I have been following your channel for about 6 months or so and your family has given me a lot to consider and reconsider. I appreciate that. That's why I believe you deserve a true response and not some "you are so awesome" response. Dove has friends, she needs parents, and that is you and Cammie. That doesn't mean she needs cops as you have described it, but she does need help to transition to independent, autonomous adulthood, and paying for her life while she lives at home doesn't seem an effective route. And frankly, it seems like some part of you resents the scenario too. I wonder, like, what does transition look like to Erin? Because for us, I don't know what she means by paying for her life, but transition to me means she's gonna have certain responsibilities as like an adult that...
Jeez, I cannot get this right. Sorry. Keep on going.
That our younger kids aren't gonna have. I think transition, there needs to be some kind of transition while she lives at home still, if we want her to help her like move into adulthood mode. I agree that Dove needs parents and not just friends. But I think part of transitioning into adulthood is us as parents become more of a friendship parent role than just like a parent role. That's how I see transition.
Well, and you can call it whatever you want, but the bottom line is, I think for us to succeed in our continued relationship with our kids, it's gonna have to evolve. Like I said, whatever we want to call it, we can call it friendship or parenting 2.0 or whatever. But one of the big dangers I felt in some of our relationships with our parents was that when they didn't evolve, they actually died.
The relationship
died.
Yeah.
So I'm less concerned about what we call it. We can talk about how to evolve, you know, in effective ways. But if you still treat kids the same way, even on the nice side, you know, if you still coddle them or pay for them, which is actually a really disempowering thing, then I think it's actually very dangerous for the relationship. So that's one thing I'm sensitive about. I also want to bring up this comment. She says, when you ask for a favor, it's not a favor at all. You know, that's where it's tricky. You know, to say it's a favor, one of the things I talked about in the last video was that it's confusing with Dove. Like, with a kid, they're completely dependent on you, and you have to wipe their ass, and you have to feed them, and you have to pay for everything. Great, I'm totally fine with that. But when they start to become capable of more, I actually don't think it's helpful to do things for them. So I don't mind not charging the kids rent at all. Like, the finances aren't an issue to me, but I'm trying to ask this question of like, what is the best way to train them and help them to grow and to empower them? And I actually think that it is to have high expectations for them to contribute to the economy of the household, because that's how it's going to be for the rest of their life with every other environment, relationship.
Well, and I think they're capable of it too. Like, I think as soon as Rainier knows how to put his shoes on, I want him to put his shoes on. I mean, it's not like I'll never put his shoes on for him again, but if I put his shoes on every single time when he could do it for himself, I think that's shortchanging him and where he's at.
And we don't, you know, we had this discussion with our kids to say, hey, do you want to pay rent? Because if you pay rent, it's a way of contributing, or you could not pay rent, but then you can contribute in other ways. And all of our kids decided that they want more of that type of relationship, that style.
Like,
so yeah,
not paying rent.
in a way, when I asked Dove for a favor, I am looking for her to contribute back into the relationship consistently. Because I think it's actually best for all of us. Okay, that was a long one. Not all these are going to be that long. Number 2 most liked comment.
This is from Kyra. Wait, so it's either I have authority over you or I won't forgive you for anything? Kind of an exaggeration, but do you see where I'm coming from? You used to be able to be the boss, and now that you can't, you won't forgive your child? I don't mean this as an insult or judgment, but it seems to me like such a minuscule thing.
I don't agree with this, and I'm not sure if it's just a miscommunication with the video. And I have to clarify, you know, this video is just one snapshot of our life, and for that matter, it's one of the more dramatic snapshots of our life, which is why we made a video about it. I wouldn't say it's like the norm of our life. So this too, like, I have authority or I won't forgive you for anything, this video to me had nothing to do with me forgiving Dove. It had more to do with me being frustrated and then bringing it up to Dove. And in fact, when she owned her kind of failure, which was the fact that she said she would do something that she didn't, I totally forgave her, actually. But you can't jump straight to forgiveness
without dealing with your own feelings first.
And I feel like this actually, you guys, I mean, we've been through a shit ton of therapy and counseling and 12-step groups and all sorts of things to process feelings, which I actually think is a pretty unusual thing for males in our culture. But for any of you parents, there's this huge epidemic, I think, for adults in America, where we are like, oh, it's cool, it's fine, I love my kids, and we post smiling pictures of them on Facebook. But deep down, we actually hate them, and we hate parenting, and we're frustrated, and we're angry. And I think we can benefit so much just by saying that and working through it. I don't suggest you stop there and you're like, my kids suck, because that's not what I'm saying about Dove. But for me to not say, hey, this situation actually was frustrating to me, and it hurt me, And I think if it continues to go on, it will hurt our relationship. To not acknowledge those feelings, I don't think there's a productive way to move past them.
Yeah. And I think actually forgiveness, I've learned, means actually just accepting reality, which, you know, after Ben shared with Dove how that made him feel, and if the next time, you know, Dove does something, I mean, there will come a point where Ben just needs to accept reality of where Dove's at.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually forgiveness. I mean, I have people in my life where I really don't like how they've treated me, but I have had to, or I've chosen to come to a point where I'm just accepting that that's where they're at in life. That's how they need to treat people right now.
And a huge part of this is actually accepting where I'm at. You know, part of the reason why I went into 12-step groups and counseling was because I didn't even think I had feelings. But you could look at people's behavior. A lot of people, they either numb themselves with addictions or they entertain themselves to death, all to avoid these types of dealing with emotions and feelings. So in a way, I used to want to be the type of dad that was like, oh, my feelings aren't going to be hurt. I just forgive and move on and I'm not either really happy or sad. I don't get affected by stuff. But that's not really human, I don't think, anymore. And it's not the type of guy or human I strive to be. So part of it is saying, oh, I do feel this way. And I was impacted by you. And let's work through this.
Meg says, whenever you talk about Dove, I'm always so worried about her mental health. And I feel like she has fallen through the cracks to identify her needs. No kid turns 18 and boom, acts like an adult. And yes, conversations like this are useful for teaching values and priorities. But in Dove's case, after hearing stories like this over and over, I feel like there is a high probability that she suffers from something that physically prevents her from completing projects like depression, anxiety, or ADD. When I look back to that time in my life, I remember being so overwhelmed all the time by even the smallest task, and being shamed when I couldn't do it only shoved me further into my depressive hole. And I'm very damaged by that now. And I know y'all don't value doctors, but honestly, she should go for screening purposes.
I'm not letting you get away with that last line. We do value doctors, but we don't prioritize them the same way everyone else does.
When Memory broke her arm like 4 years ago, I'm really glad a doctor knew how to set it.
And also, I don't think anyone should be told exactly what to do for, you know, that bugged me. Besides that though.
Yeah, besides that, I mean, I wouldn't completely rule out that she could be dealing with some of this stuff. I don't know.
Well, I want to provide a little bit of context here.
Yeah.
One is, Dove has been to a therapist by her choice. We encourage that and tell our kids that we'll pay for that.
Yeah.
And I went thinking like, oh man, our kids, we're going to get all sorts of diagnoses that are just like, our kids are messed up. Because I think we're kind of crazy too, honestly. And our therapist was like, well, she seems fine to me. And I was like, what, really? Like, I was like almost like waiting for more juicy stuff. And I don't say that to say like our kid's great and healthy and normal, but we've taken steps to get outside opinions. And the type of video you see is not the norm around here. Like I said, it's so much more interesting to make a video about an area of friction or failure than just like a normal day life.
Things are going
At least it's
good.
More interesting for me. Yeah.
I also just feel like she's had a really hard time in her life. Like, I remember being 18 and not knowing, like, is that up or is that down? I don't really know.
Well, she has 2 jobs, 3 jobs. She's like juggling a lot of relationships, a lot of responsibility. She's in transition mentally and emotionally. So I'm not worried about it. I'm still not worried about it. And we do value doctors.
Crazy Wheels said, I have no idea how this dude found someone to marry him and have multiple kids. He seems like such a crappy person on the inside.
This is a bummer of a comment to me for a couple reasons. One is, I think it shows how much of a target you can be if you just share your feelings. Because in this video, I never said my way's the right way. I just shared a story.
Yeah.
I never encouraged other people to live a certain way. And I don't know, I never even I don't think I even defended my feelings. I just kind of shared what I thought was a victory relationally for us. So if that makes me a crappy person.
They didn't even say on the outside, they say the inside. Which is like, how the hell do you even know someone's insides?
Well, I think a lot of times people live their lives in denial of the feelings that they have. But more than that, what's weird about this comment is they say, I have no idea how a dude found someone to marry him. So this is as much a slam on you. I mean, I know it's not intended that way, but if you look at the logic of it, they're saying you have to be an idiot to marry...
Yeah. Or I was abused severely or something.
To marry a crappy person. Like, that calls your judgment into question, or your brain power or discernment or whatever. And I know people are intending to do that, but that's exactly what you're doing. So yeah, it's a quick judgment, that's for sure. Moving on. This is from Robin. I don't know. I didn't really agree with some of the ways you described a few things, particularly the I am not your bitch comment. Obviously, I don't know how your relationships with your parents were when you were 18, but I don't consider that age an instant adult. To me, that is the cusp of adulthood, with guidance still very much needed. I understand hurt feelings and disappointment, and maybe it's my particular generation or the way my parents raised me specifically, but this one didn't sit well with me. I just feel like you are setting the dynamics of your future relationship as you are no longer her parents. You're just people who want to be friends. Parents always give a little more to their children until they can truly relate. I'm not bashing you, and I generally love how you guys handle situations, but this one just struck a nerve, I guess. First of all, I really appreciate her tone. She's challenging us, but in a way that is saying this is her opinion and her experience, instead of just a blanket like, this is how it is, folks. Really appreciate that, Robin. And I definitely still see Dove as needing guidance. I would feel like I would let her move out of her house, but I would feel uncomfortable with it. Like it would be hard for me, because I still think that she needs us in her life as her parent figure. But I think because she is on the cusp of adulthood, we are feeling more the need to relate to her also as friends and not just as parents. I don't think she needs it, our guidance. I don't think she needs it. I think it would help her. I agree with that. Lot. I think it would be beneficial. It would help. Yeah. That's one of the tricky things about this language, is like we often use the word need, or we use these black and white terms. Like this is good and that's bad, or she's an adult, not a child, or she's a child, not an adult. And these black and white terms connote, like, they come with this like kind of moral responsibility that makes conversation, I think, really tricky. I'm much more of a fan of talking about pros and cons of things. But just so you know, Robin, and I guess everyone else that's watching, the way that I see this whole transition is it's all a spectrum, you know, from child to adult, or from parenting to friendship. Some kids need more guidance at 18 than other kids. But we're just on this spectrum. And this video was more just sharing an experience of what we're learning about the spectrum, and less like, oh, she's not a kid anymore, she's just an adult, we're kicking her out. I mean, she's living in her house, but it's confusing. This is from Stephanie. There's a lot of things that I appreciate in how you parent your children, but I have to disagree with you on this one. While it's not the easiest route, I think clear, direct communication with no strings attached is the healthiest long-term solution in any relationship. I don't believe that changes whether you are a parent, child, or friends. It sounds like you were disappointed and hurt, which you are absolutely allowed to be, but expressing that disappointment through the withholding of support, affection, love, whatever, erodes trust in the long run. I don't know if I fully understand what you're saying, but I really, really disagree with that. But I didn't used to. What do you disagree with? Well, what she says is, I think direct communication with no strings attached is the healthiest long-term solution to any relationship. Let me clarify what I hear when I hear that. No strings attached means you don't depend on anyone? No, it means I'm going to provide this same type of relationship no matter what your response is. So enablement, up the yin yang then. Well, I guess that's the way to put it. That's a result, but it's saying, I mean, no strings attached means I'm going to give you this thing, like my time, my energy, my money, and regardless of what you do, I'm just going to keep on giving it. I mean, a couple ways that this could look in a marriage is I'm going to be there for you, and you can go and cheat on me. Yeah. Or let's flip it. Yeah. You're going to be there for me. I can go and cheat.
Right.
And I can go and have fun. And I can go do drugs. And I can go spend all our money.
And I'm just supposed to
and you're there for me.
wait for
no
you.
strings attached. That's what, you know,
Yeah.
that's the nth degree of no strings attached.
Yeah.
I think in any good relationship, there are always strings attached. I mean, and strings attached is a negative way to put it in a way.
Like, I could see how I've seen in my relationships, I've had to let certain relationships go, or I've had to like change my expectations in the relationship to make it a healthier one for me, which kind of is that's like a very lesser degree to what she's actually saying, I think.
Well, I think we've learned the hard way that if we don't listen to the feedback from other people, it's actually a very prideful way of damaging us and them, really by not listening. And this is like what we learned about setting boundaries, and a lot of what we learned in therapy was how to set the proper boundaries or set the proper strings and how to communicate them. Now, I think when you don't communicate those strings and they're kind of mysterious, or they're just designed to manipulate someone else, I think that gets into dangerous territory. But I mean, like, let me give you one example for parenting. Specifically with Dove or any of our kids, there's all sorts of strings attached, like to live in our house. Because if you are destructive to the other people around you, either physically or emotionally, we're going to let them know that they're not going to be welcome in our house anymore. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it realistically is that way. That is one of the strings associated with living in our house.
Maybe not like the young kids, because like, although I've had people,
I don't know. We haven't been in that
I've had people
situation.
who've adopted kids and they were young.
They were a threat.
But they were like severely abusive, and so they had to send them away for a while. I mean, you have to do what you have to do, like, to keep...
I just think there's always strings attached.
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize those and then learn how to communicate them in an effective way, it's going to be a really manipulative and unauthentic relationship. And a lot of, I think, parents say that they don't have strings attached with their kids. They're like, oh, I'll love you no matter what. But then they end up like, almost like you said, enabling them by saying, okay, you can essentially take advantage of me. So you don't do your chores, you don't provide for the family, I'll pay for you, but there's like resentment building up.
Which no other relationship in their life will probably look like this.
Unless they go into a marriage.
Unless they
That's
go
just like
into,
that dynamic.
Yeah, which, you know, that happens a lot. But like work, if they go, their boss isn't going to do this. Like, they need to learn how to deal with, every relationship has strings attached.
And strings aren't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's
to
actually
be.
not communicating them honestly that becomes, I think, a bad manipulative thing. But, a lot of, I'm wondering, I don't know this person's background, but we came from a Christian spiritual background where we were taught that it was ignoble or unloving to create strings. Like, everything was just unconditional. So what that basically meant was you took a lot of abuse, but it was more loving just to continue to try and love people.
Well, and the funny thing is you can think you don't have any strings attached, but everyone will build resentment, and you might not even know that you're building resentment until years later, and then you just like hate this person, and you don't even know why, and you hate yourself. Like, there's no way around this.
Okay, guys, so those were some of the more like critical comments that we got, but they weren't all critical. There was a lot of encouraging ones, so I just want to read through two because there was a lot of you guys that benefited from this scenario or saw aspects that you agreed with. Fred Muppet, is that his real name? I love that name. Says, I feel like learning about how to parent as an adult has been the hardest stage of my parenting journey so far. Love that you're talking about this.
This is from Jillian. Wow, the comments have me floored. So much judgment and many unkind words. How many of you actually have adult children? Even so, those children aren't Dove. In my own experience, my two boys are very different, and to some degree, how my husband and I handle them is different because they respond to the same rule differently. Even if Ben and or Cammie is screwing up these kids, how does publicly name-calling benefit them as parents? How about kind words or advice? Maybe the parent-child relationship doesn't change the minute the child turns 18, but over time it will, and it should. I commend Ben and Cammie for giving Dove some freedom and space. Ben, thank you for opening up and sharing your intimate thoughts as you navigate this relationship.
Jillian, you're welcome. And that's really all that we set out to do by making this or any of our videos, really. It's just to start conversations with you guys for topics that we don't see being discussed. So we're not telling you that this is how an 18-year-old ought to be raised, but we are saying, hey, we think this is a great conversation to talk about and discuss, and this is where we're at right now. I'll bet you anything we won't be the same place in 5 years, and that's okay. And maybe
then we'll have other kids that have turned 18 by then, and it'll look different with them.
And maybe our journey will help you guys. So, you know, the one thing I will say, I'm not here to defend my decision with you guys, but I'm still happy with it. Me knowing where Dove is at and what she can handle and watching her thrive. I mean, there was a few comments where people were like, oh, I'm surprised Ben doesn't see that he's exactly like Dove and that he's failed in project and he's failed on his first book. And I'm like,
we've had countless conversations about,
of course I'm just like her, and she's
so
just
the same.
She's just like me. Like,
yeah,
how would you say that? I don't know that. But what does that have to do with anything? Like, of course I see she's like me, so I'm not like coming down on her like, Dove, how could you ever do this? You know, when people don't show up to an appointment or they disappoint me, if I don't go to them and share my feelings towards mending the relationship, I think that's actually a way of giving up on the relationship. And one thing I'm confident about is I don't want to give up on the relationship with our kids or our spouses or our family. That's a lot of what this channel, why it's titled Fight for Together. We do think it's a fight. We think it's easy, or sorry, it's hard. It's not easy. And while we don't always know what to do, this is our way of fighting for the relationship. This is my way of fighting for my relationship with my teenager. And it might not look like everyone else's, and we're okay with that. Whew. Okay, wow, that was a lot of talking. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Goodbye. Okay, I have been such a bad baseball fan this year. I didn't wear this jersey, I don't think, once the entire baseball season.